Hi, and welcome back to API CAN Codes Unit 1, Data in Learners' Lives. Today we'll be talking about Lesson 4, Sources of Data. In this lesson, students are going to learn about primary and secondary sources of data and sort data sources according to those categorizations. First, we've got a warm-up. This is going to build on an activity that we did towards the end of last lesson where students identified a local issue that they might want to look into. What we're going to have students do now is brainstorm 2 to 3 sources of data for that chosen issue. These could come from multiple sources. So students might look on the internet for sources of data, they might design a plan to collect data, or they might just think of sort of a hypothetical source of data that would be useful in this case. So we're going to recap the data information knowledge wisdom model from lesson 1.3. And then we are going to move right into sources of data. So what we're covering here are primary sources that are collected directly from the source versus secondary sources that are coming from sources that have already been collected, processed, and made available for use. That might be because of the work of researchers or analysts or some kind of public service. On this slide, we talk about financial reports being presented by a company itself or a reporter presenting their finding being an example of a secondary source. We included this because we noticed that students in the past were struggling a little bit with the idea of what a secondary source really was. They tended to lean towards categorizing a lot of things as primary sources. So including this document that is a summary of information taken from sort of individual financial data points and things like that was a helpful way to help them see what a secondary source could look like. And the other example we've got here is this Open Data DC dataset on DCPS schools. In this case, it hopefully is clear to students that the schools themselves are the primary source of data, with Open Data DC serving as sort of a summarizing and thus secondary level source. On this slide, we're having students do some brainstorming. They're imagining that they're on the Starbucks research team and trying to evaluate the popularity of a new drink. We want them to think of an example of a primary source to answer this question and a secondary data source to answer this question. Students might go in a lot of different directions with this. We do recommend putting them in small groups so they can talk through their ideas and sort those out. On this next slide, we revisit our local issue project that we talked about at the beginning of this class and the data sources that students brainstormed for that issue. We want them to categorize these as either primary or secondary sources and check those answers with the small group around them and see if everybody agrees that those are either primary or secondary. Once students have talked through their data sources with their small group, we want them to share a few with the class, including how they sorted them as either primary or secondary. This is a nice time to check in on sort of which sources seem to be easy or hard to sort for students. Our guess, based on some past experience, is that students often struggle with sort of those like financial report or a company provided summary of some things that are going on. Generally, those are going to fall into the secondary source category, but students often don't quite know where they fit. So we are next going to talk about the Selfie City project and website. First, we just have a slide on how the data was collected. So the way the Selfie City site found its data was that individual participants in different cities took selfies. They were able to submit those through MTurk to this database. MTurk collected something like 100-something thousand selfies. There was analysis done automatically with experts validation, and then summaries of trends and selfies can actually all be seen on this website. So we want students to explore the data and the graphs at Selfie City. We recommend that they start by scrolling down on the first page and opening the Selfie Exploratory page on the top row. This first slide is just to sort of poke around and explore, see what students can find. And we move from there to having them do some categorization. So we want students thinking about whether this is a primary or secondary source. Selfie City is sort of a weird example because you can see the individual selfie data points on the website, which is somewhat of a primary source, but you can also see these graphs of sort of information being put together that feels a little more like a secondary source, because now you're looking at sort of what Selfie City has done to summarize this information. So those answers might vary a little bit. We also want students looking for different trends that they recognize. They'll probably see this from the graphs, and thinking about what the data are, individual selfies, and what information they're presented in. Mostly a lot of different dot plots. We also want students to compare different graphs from different countries and think about bias. Some people are included in this list of cities, some are left out. Students might notice in some cases that whole continents are left out. We also had some past students gripe that their particular city was not included. And these all, I think, are good avenues in to talking about the issue of bias in this data set. You could also ask students how they might have done this differently to address that issue. So this is our exit ticket today. We are having students categorize the following study designs based on A, what kind of data source they use, and B, what kinds of variables they're collecting. So we are having them practice both the discrete, continuous, nominal, ordinal skill, and we're also having them practice this new primary, secondary data source skill. All the solutions to these exit ticket questions should be in your exit ticket from our curriculum that does have a key. So I won't review them exactly here, but if you need some more, if you need just sort of a key on which ones are which, feel free to go to that exit ticket and look there. As always, thanks for tuning in for these overview videos, and thanks for teaching this curriculum.